Hi everybody, it's John from Live and Ready again. I was going to give you a little bit of an update about how things are going and also a little bit about how I got involved in all of this journey. But something came up which I think is just worth mentioning. The European Union kindly took my attention today. Actually, it was a couple of days ago, and what they've done is they have actually created a European-wide strategy of preparedness, which I thought was really interesting timing, and it just shows how things are developing when not just nations but also continents are kind of being shaped by what's happening in the world and how to respond to that. So it's really, really important that we are having this discussion and talking about these things. So the European Preparedness Strategy basically it's almost like a little bit of shock tactics to get people and countries thinking differently. And I think the UK government, I mentioned, has done a website about it ourselves, and I'll go on to that in a minute. But to have Ursula von Thingamajig from the European Union doing her thing and saying we have a strategy about preparedness for the whole of the European Union, that's a big thing. And I know the annoying thing is that I saw it on CNN, and they really do take it to the fear factor. You know, we must stockpile food, and it's just the wrong way of motivating people. So I would much prefer a proper conversation which allows normal people like you and I to have a little bit of understanding on what are the small things that we can do now in order to help us to prepare or to become ready or living ready. So if you want to have a look at it, I'll try and drop some links into the chat towards the end of this video or after the video, and then you can have a look at it yourself. But they have this whole strategy, which I won't go into. But the key thing is what does it mean for people like you and I? And that's the thing. So what? What does it mean for us? Well, it means that they're doing this for a reason. There are threats to security at the moment. The political state of the world is a little bit turbulent. It's certainly more turbulent than it has been in the last few decades. And people are starting to recognize that. Nations, leaders of nations are starting to recognize that. And I don't hear many people at a family or a community level who are having this kind of conversation. And so now the governments are saying, right, if you're not talking about it, we're going to try and put it on your agenda. Would you please try to consider yourself a little bit more resilient and how you actually do this? So the EU are saying that, how do you prepare for natural disasters? And I won't go into loads of specifics right now, but you can think of all kinds of natural disasters. I mean, the masses of flooding that they've had across Europe, especially in Spain recently. But then you've got the other extremes as well of forest fires, you know. But what would you do in that kind of thing? Obviously, forest fires is like exit stage left. But with flooding, some people, you know, I think it was Madrid, they didn't have any warning. And so this thing just hit them. Now, that's a massive problem, but it's the aftermath of what happens when a government is overwhelmed. That's what they're getting at. What happens when the government is overwhelmed and can't actually support the civilians immediately? And so whether it's natural disasters or whether it's human-induced disasters or hybrid threats, so cyber attacks, which can have consequences on all kinds of our society, whether it's, you know, hospitals and airports and food supply chains, and I mean, you name it, the cyber attacks can affect all kinds of areas in society, which then have a knock-on effect to people like you and I. So how would you prepare for that sort of thing? And of course, then there's political crisis with things like wars, when nations can't talk through diplomacy and something like Ukraine happens. Hopefully that won't get bigger, but obviously with NATO and the threat with Russia, that's why Europe are going, we've got a little flag we're waving here. Everybody, you probably need to consider getting ready. So they're actually asking people like you and I know we're not in Europe, I'm in England, UK, but I'm not gonna, oh, I'm sorry, I put a thumbs up there. Look, I'm not doing any political stuff, okay? I'm not going Europe, not Europe, Brexit, not Brexit. Stuff that, it's happened. But whatever your political opinions are, if something happens, possibly when something happens next, how would we become more resilient? How would we become more self-sufficient? What do we need to do differently now in order for us to be ready, live ready? So they're saying, how can, their strategy is, how can an individual or a family be resilient for 72 hours when it comes to things like food and water? And that's the key thing. They think through their data and through their modelling, the first 72 hours of a crisis are critical. If something happens and the government's overwhelmed, then if the population can just hang on themselves without desperately clinging on and being completely dependent upon the government response, then 72 hours, that'll help massively. So that's where EU has done this, and they've only done it on the 26th of March. That's why I'm doing this today. 26th of March, they've just released this new strategy. Now, the UK government set up their own website. It was last year sometime, and it looks a little bit like that. So if you're looking on the government website, it's, if you Google www.gov.uk/prepare, I think that'll get you to where it needs to be. But it's getting prepared for emergencies. It's that orange page, getting prepared for emergencies. So the UK government are also recognising that because of the instability in the world, they are also needing to ask civilians, members of the public, to consider how to get more resilient. So this is a pretty timely channel to help you get ready. Now, they talk about making a plan. They talk about having a household emergency plan, which is really good. They talk about chatting this through with others. Chatting it through with others. Neighbours though, you know, all of your neighbours, you can have a chat with them. It's going to be a bit of a quirky, strange conversation, but it's going to become more and more relevant. And everybody that I'm talking to, there's only a few people have gone, you're weird. What are you talking about? A lot of people are just going, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. I've been wondering how to do this kind of thing myself, or how to think about it. So the other thing that the UK government website says is get emergency supplies. And they talk about creating preparing your home for flooding, or, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. What would you do if something happened? What would you need to do to your house? Like turn off the electrics, turn off the gas, get out. But then after you've prepared your home, if it's a different kind of disaster and you need to stay at home, then get an emergency kit and get some emergency supplies. And they've got a little list here down the bottom, okay? So they talk about things like a battery or wind-up torch, so that you can just power it through winding it up, and solar ones are good as well. Portable power bank, obviously for things like phones or other things. Battery or wind-up radio. You'll spot one just there. And what I'll do is, over a period of time, I'll share some of the kit that I've managed to develop over the years, or that I've bought over the years. They talk about having spare batteries, a first aid kit, hand sanitizer and wet wipes, bottled water, enough for 3 days for your family, non-perishable food, and baby supplies. Obviously, if you've got a baby, I wouldn't bother buying them if you haven't. That's not going to be much fun. So that's the government website. And I just wanted to put this out there because this is a very relevant conversation. It's important. It's important for us to consider what we can do now. And so here's just the starter. We need to get ready in order to be ready, in order to live ready. And I hope you find this conversation helpful. I'm going to get into more specifics next time, and maybe start sharing some lists of equipment, some lists of food that you can prepare yourselves. Doesn't have to be spend big now. It doesn't have to be max out the credit card and buy all this stuff because it's going to happen tomorrow. No. Just, you can have little bits of your budget on a weekly basis, buying a little bit of extra food, a little bit of gear. And if you know what to start with, then you can start the journey rather than panicking. You can live without fear, and you can live ready. So we'll get practical next time, but I hope you found this helpful. Catch you next time. Cheers. Bye.